Hello and welcome to Love, Dating, and Relationships for Spiritual Women. I'm your host, Julie Grimm. I'm a spiritual healer and guide in the Modern Mystery School, and I support people on living their personal spiritual paths here in the physical with purpose and intention. And I am blessed and honored to have Goddess Danielle LoPresti with me here today. Danielle co-founded with her husband, Fiat Lux. They're in Central Florida. And I actually know her again through the Modern Mystery School where I study and teach as well. Hi, Danielle.
Hey, Julie.
So good to have you. I love that here I am in Boston, literally wearing a sweater, an actual sweater, and you're in Florida wearing a tank top.
Yeah, it's beautiful out today. I love it down here.
So gorgeous. So Danielle, just to get right down to it, I guess, our major topic here is about successful long-term relationships, because although actually I don't know how old you are, but we're pretty much the same age. And I would say quite young to have achieved this. You've been in a committed long-term relationship for going on 11, 12 years now. Is that correct?
Yeah, almost 12 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I'm 31. So since I was a teenager, essentially, which is kind of wild.
It's kind of wild because A, since you were a teenager, and then B, I mean, we're both in committed spiritual paths, including your husband, where, you know, I feel like I've changed so much in the last 5 years alone, or even the last year. Like, to have somebody that I stay in a committed relationship with through all of that huge change, it's not trivial. But even if somebody weren't necessarily doing all that super deep work, being with somebody for that amount of time, especially since the age of, 18, 19, is huge.
Yeah, you're right. It's something I'm like realizing more and more recently.
And it's like an achievement, actually.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I'm curious if you could tell people who might be listening, maybe people who desire a partnership like that, or who are in a partnership but might be feeling like they're struggling, what major keys or successes you've seen in action over these last 12 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I could write a book. So, I've gotten lots of advice over the years as far as very like useful little tips to help with just being in a long-term relationship that have been really, really helpful. Like write lists for your husband, and men want to be respected and women want to feel safe, all these really sweet keys. But as time goes on, it truly is about knowing and loving and putting myself first, which feels really counterintuitive for most people in a partnership. And I think especially women, because we're so, especially early on in relationships, both men and women were so eager to please and eager to serve one another. And just like, what can I give? What can I give? What can I do? What can I gift? And I feel like early on in mine and Jake's relationship, it really was just like an outpouring of ourselves onto each other. And, I think depending on what like books and speakers on relationships that you've been exposed to, a lot of people really refer to like the obsession phase or like the honeymoon phase. And this idea that like there's this phase of a relationship that's just all passion and all excitement that'll eventually go away. Not to say that love and romance will go away, but I think that that newness and that just complete overpouring of energy, it's not sustainable, and then you see like a lot of people just feeling like they've let go of themselves, right? Or they don't know who they are anymore. So Jake and I were fortunate enough to find the mystery school probably 2 or 3 years into our relationship, after years of our own spiritual, our own personal and collective like spiritual journeys. But through this work of self-mastery and this work with the mystery school and looking at ourselves all the time, it's made it so much more rich to come together. I feel like there's that saying, like, you can't, what is it? No one can love you until you love yourself kind of thing, which is like a really like vague and kind of feels like a harsh statement. But the truth is your capacity to love in general is the same, whether it's for yourself, for God, for your partner, for your children. So it's like the more we can learn to love ourselves and know ourselves, the more we can show up in relationship. And I find that especially over the last couple of years of becoming a mother and stepping more into like my womanhood and out of maidenhood, I'm realizing that I don't really have much to offer if I'm not filling myself up first. So whether this looks like pursuing a personal interest or passion, you know, like I love rock climbing, I love dancing, I love yoga. And there's a list of all the things I've also fell in and out of love with as far as hobbies are concerned over the last 10 years. It's always been really important for me to have something that really just like fills me. You know what I'm saying? Because it also like keeps things fresh, I think, for Jake and I, where if we have something that we're working on individually, like you said, inevitably we're going to be new people all the time. We change so much. And it's like we get to re-fall in love with each other all the time if we're just always developing ourselves and always changing and always growing. With that being said, I think there's also another piece is not having expectations for who someone is going to be forever, which has been huge for me because I can even look into the future, and I love being able to look into the future and have no idea who my husband's going to be, you know?
Well, I was actually going to ask that when you're talking about all that growth and change, there is that sort of like unveiling, which is exciting, and you can sort of re-fall in love. But do you ever feel afraid? You know, afraid when you change, or even afraid when they change? Like, are we still going to care for each other the same way? Or when I'm this different way, am I still going to be, I don't know what, attractive or still flow with their energy?
That's a great question, Julie. You know, my like personal insecurities, yeah, if I like dive really deep into them, like there is a insecurity and a fear that one day who I change into, one day who my husband evolves and changes into, you know, as I say it too, it doesn't really feel like such a fear. It feels not like the truth. But yeah, there's that fear of like, if I change one day, will you not be in love with that woman that person becomes, or who I become? But, you know, I think because we've kind of just stepped into the fear and kept going, like, because what's the alternative? Let's never change.
Right, which I think actually people do.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a huge, like, kind of, like, how many movies and TV shows have you seen where it's like, you've changed? It's like, well,
right. It's like, yeah.
We got together when I was 19. I would hope I would change. So,
yeah.
So for me, it's like, yeah, I mean, there is that fear, but it really just comes from like subconscious insecurities. Because in my heart of hearts, I know from the get-go that Jake and I have fallen in love with each other's soul, like who we are, despite all of our flaws and despite all of like the things that are really like exciting and flashy in this moment about each other, because those things could go away. Despite like, yeah, the things we enjoy together, because those things can go away. At the core of everything, like we're just deeply in love with each other. And it's an interesting thing because I think that I overlook that a lot, because I think I've had so many people in my life like come to me for relationship advice at one point or another. And the first thing I always ask, like, are you in love? Like, do you like really love him? Like, are you madly, deeply in love? And it's actually interesting to me how seldom the answer is yes. Or it's like I don't know. You know, a lot of times I think people, especially now, like find themselves in relationships because there's so many boxes checked, right? Of like, oh, he makes this kind of money, or he works in this kind of industry, or he's into these things. He's my type physically. You know, there's like these lists.
It's coming through the mind. It's like a logic problem.
Yeah, but I think that honestly, that's how most people are like searching for partners and searching for lovers, when I feel like the magnetism of just actually being in love with someone who your souls can like work together with. It's not like, because real talk, me and Jake, when we first got together, he was everything but my type, you know? I remember he was my really, really good friend and my roommate. And I was actually like not into him at all, but there was a part of me that was so in love with him already as a person and as a soul. And I feel really grateful for the opportunity to have gotten to know my husband on a platonic level before we became romantic, because there was so much honesty there that like there wasn't like he had met my ex-boyfriends. He had seen me in some really like unattractive states. He had like the full spectrum. He had just seen me, and I didn't have like an opportunity to hide myself, and vice versa. So yeah.
It's so powerful. I mean, I feel almost a little bit of envy at that. And it kind of goes to what we're talking about, the check boxes too. This is my own personal position and opinion that I'm throwing down right here, but so bear with me. But I do think that there doesn't have to be this way, but something about the rise of the dating apps has both kind of prevented that platonic stage from being as present, and also encouraged us to look at those check boxes maybe more than we would have otherwise.
Yeah.
All right, so moving back to relationship success, away from my diatribe on dating apps. So putting yourself first. Yeah. And I mean, I loved what you were saying about this, about those fears, and just connecting to that love and really honing in on, am I madly in love with this person? And do I want to stay committed to them? Because I think that that might be a key point. Is the connection there? And then are you committed to that connection? So if somebody's not sure that the connection's there, could you speak to that at all?
I'll try. Yeah. So I feel like sometimes I feel kind of naive to like, this is going to seem like a really first world problem, but I feel really naive to bigger relationship issues and like breakups. Like when people come to me like trying to like, when I have friends who are going through like a big breakup or a big moment of, I don't know what I should do here. Like, should we stay together? Should we not? Sometimes it's really difficult for me to speak from a place of experience, because I've never been an adult and gone through a breakup, first and foremost. So that's something I don't have a lot of like wisdom with, but I think if the connection, I guess, what is the connection would be the question, right? Because I think people can have like deep attraction for each other, deep love for each other. They can be really sexually compatible. They can have a lot of fun together, but like, what is the foundation of their relationship? So when we say the connection, I think it's just like a weaving of a lot of different things, right? For me, I feel like the part of my marriage and the part of the connection that I have with my husband that is the strongest chord is, I want to say this in a way that does it justice. We want to be like, what's your purpose? Like, why are you here? And I think a lot of people are in relationship because like they're just really into each other, and sure, there's this connection, but what is the connection? But like,
or maybe even that they want to feel like we want to feel safe. Yeah. We want to feel secure. We want to feel respected, but there might not be a higher level order to that purpose.
So for me, it feels really, really valuable and rich to know that like Jake and I both have very similar, if not the same, goals in life as individuals, and we bring that into our marriage. So we both have individual missions and purposes in life that we really connect to. And it turns out that us being together helps us along that mission as individuals. And we feel and we find that we can be more powerful together when we show up in authenticity and in alignment with each other. So, is the connection worth committing to? I think that if you love someone, that might not necessarily be enough, right? If you are really attracted to someone, you have a lot of fun with someone, that might not necessarily be enough. If the connection that you're experiencing with your partner is going to make both of you a better person, and push you into your own personal greatness, then I think it's something to like look at. But also you don't want to go to the other end of the spectrum and like, oh, this person really makes me a better person, but I'm not having fun and I'm not in joy. And yeah, they're really making me grow and they're pushing me to all these different limits, but I'm not in love. That's like the other end of the spectrum where it's like, maybe you should let that go as well, or alchemize that relationship into something else. But
Ooh, I love that. Alchemize it into something else.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think that people can relate to one another almost out of a sense of obligation and duty,
Yeah.
where it becomes kind of stale or like I should, or kind of exactly what you were saying, that there's some growth aspect, but are you really being seen? Are you really being honored for who and what you are, and are you able to honor that in the other person on a deep level?
Yeah, and are you being given the space to show up in like your full authenticity? Because that's also the most beautiful thing about being in love. And I even say this too about even showing up like in sexual relationship with people. Like it should really be this opportunity for you to show up in full authenticity. It's like this stage for you to completely and totally be yourself in safety. So yeah, you might be being pushed into these places of growth and change, but if you're not like, ha, here I am fully, then I don't know, I feel there might just be something to look at. So going back to your question, yeah, if someone was to come to me and ask me about whether their connection is worth commitment, is that kind of what we're talking about?
Yeah.
It's like, yes. What are you committed to with yourself? You know, like, what do you want out of life? Like, who do you want to be? What are you trying to create? And does that relationship help you achieve those things? Then yeah, it's worth looking at and perhaps committing to. But you know, it's funny because like I'm not to say that marriage is a commitment that can't be broken, because it certainly can and should be in a lot of situations, but even just with marriage too, for me, it's been that commitment of, you know, for better, for worse, or, you know, like I'll see like the darkest sides of you, but I also know like the heights and want to see higher highs of you. And it's, yeah, that commitment of because I love you and I believe in you and I trust you, like I'm willing to stick through all of it to see what we can accomplish together.
Yeah. That is, I mean, you're saying it so simply and easily, but to me, like that is profound. And maybe that speaks more just to my own fears or worries or things that I've struggled with, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate, like to allow both yourself to see and be seen in those highs and lows is scary, but then to allow somebody else into that and be able to reciprocate, I mean, it's certainly not a trivial thing at all.
Like true intimacy. Mm-hmm.
That's huge. So huge. When I was asking that question too about love, I kind of I had my own secret motives again, kind of like with my online dating agenda, which
let's hear it.
Which of course I'm not going to hold back.
Please.
So being part of the dating scene as I've grown older, I feel like something really sad has happened. And when you were talking about you asking these questions of people like, well, are you really in love? I feel like I've encountered that, which is that I feel like people don't know what love is. And I had the beautiful fortune and serendipity of meeting somebody when I was younger who was like my best friend and I was madly in love with, and I signed up for a different life. So it didn't last, and that's okay. But I know that that's possible. I know, you know, probably my future relationship, it will look nothing like that. But regardless, like that experience of being, like you were saying, so intimate with somebody and really experiencing the power of love in my own life has caused me to have immense discernment around what's not love. Whereas I find that some people might not have had that experience, or might still, for whatever reason, not be able to identify what's love and what's not. Yeah. Okay, so that was just my diatribe then. But I guess, so a question, if I'm going to ask a question about that, it's like, again, I guess it's not really a question, but I wonder if people just don't know what love is, or people are so afraid of it that they close off, like maybe it's there, or that possibility is there, or that possibility of connection and feeling and intimacy is there, but people just for whatever reason aren't open to allowing it to be that.
Perhaps. I mean, you're saying all these things, and in my mind, I'm trying to say, how would I define what being in love really is? And it's like almost an impossible thing to explain. But I think that one of the reasons we fall like so head over heels deep in love with like our first boyfriend or girlfriend is because like to a certain extent we're naive, but not in a negative way. We're just innocent, I guess I should say, right? Like we're so much more open to just falling headfirst into something. And yeah, like you said, like I think people become more guarded based off of their experiences, but also based off of the societal idea of what love is and what relationships are. And yeah, it's something that can be only like individually experienced, right? So because I'm still learning so much about like what true love is. Like I've been in love and I've experienced romantic love, and I've been like so insanely romantically passionately in love. Like it's so much a part of who I am, even as like a little girl, like believing in love in that way. But it's developing into something so much deeper for me, where it's like, do I experience unconditional love? Like we all talk about, I think we all like have this concept of unconditional love in our minds, like, oh, we unconditionally love our children, we unconditionally love our partner. But to really think about that, like, would you love someone full acceptance and full and like love for someone, even if they didn't meet your expectations, or even if they hurt you, or even if they left you or changed? And that kind of love takes so much courage. And where does courage really like come from if you don't like know who you are, and you don't feel confident in yourself, or you don't feel like you've worked through a lot of like your fears and insecurities? So it's like almost like the capacity in which we can love and receive love like really directly correlates to how much we're willing to see, know, and love ourselves and work on ourselves. And as time goes on, I feel like I have like fully signed up and committed to a life of just going deeper and deeper into myself and wanting to be my best self. Like I am faced with all of these questions, like, do I love my husband unconditionally? Do I fully accept him for who he is? And then how do I like work with the answers to become better at loving him and loving myself, loving my daughter, loving other people?
What a beautiful way to put it. It's like, how can I become better at loving?
Yeah. I want
How
more
can I
love.
become a better lover?
Yeah.
It's huge. And then, also kind of your answer seated in there, or partial answer, is like, how can I become better at loving myself?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you were saying in the beginning. That's so much of what I know I've learned through the mystery school and through my work in the lineage of King Solomon is who I am. Because you can say you love yourself, but if you're in denial about 80% of who and what you are and how you feel, like how much are you really loving yourself? So knowing and seeing who you really are, but then loving it.
Yeah.
And that can be the hardest task.
Absolutely. And it's just like we talked a bit about this before the video, before we started recording, about like stretching your capacity for fill in the blank, whatever, right? Like for more abundance, for success, for love. So it's like, I kind of just said this, like, I want to receive more love, like from the universe, from my husband, from other people, from myself. So it's like, it all goes together. Like I can't expect to know how to like give what I don't know how to receive. And Jake and I, we joke about this all the time. And it might just be a part of my, who I am, but I just feel like I have just just touched the surface when it comes to like receiving and giving love and receiving and giving pleasure. And like, there's just this big, vast unknown of like how much I can like grow and learn and unfold like in that space of love, that I don't know, it's like I could say, yeah, I have a successful relationship and everything's good right now, so let's just stay this way forever. But it's like leaning into that uncertainty even more, because I'm sure some people look at someone like myself or someone who's been in a relationship a lot longer than me, it's like, oh, they're like, there's like this security there. Like, we know that they're going to be together forever, and it feels safe. But to be quite honest, like, I feel safe in my marriage, but I also love the feeling of like testing the boundaries all the time. Like, Jake and I are currently, in a Kabbalah tree, and we're always going through different levels of training and initiation or healings, or even just normal work stuff that are really stretching us and changing us all the time. And it's like, being able to like stretch and meet each other where we're at in any given moment is a challenge, and it's like scary, and there really is no certainty in it, because both you and I know, Julie, too, like in the community of the Modern Mystery School, we're surrounded by so many epic people who are just doing so many amazing things, and sometimes inevitably that just means people split up. And this is also a truth that I'm like not attached to either, but that just kind of makes it beautiful, because it means that we're committed, but we're committed to ourselves first and foremost. And it just so happens that the commitments we've made to ourselves allow us to be committed to each other. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. And it's so powerful. And it's, for me, there's like something terrifying about it, but also exhilarating in what you said. But, in a way that keeps your relationship fresh forever, because you're literally always refreshed and renewed people coming to it.
Yeah.
So there's, that stagnation, or where comfort becomes a container where somebody starts to sort of chafe at that, isn't even really a possibility.
Yeah, no. And honestly, it's like in moments, I think when we feel the most maybe agitated or unattracted with each other, it's when one of us is really going for something and the other one isn't. Like, we've both voiced to each other in different ways and at different times how attractive it is when one of us is really passionately engaged in something, and how unattractive it is when we're not, And I also think that that's been like a key cornerstone to our relationship too, is I don't believe in over communicating and not taking anything personally, being able to say something like, I don't find it attractive when you do that, and not have to have like this big fight or emotional response to it, and just take it as just information, not to say that I'm 100% a master at that, but striving for it all the time has been really helpful, just to be able to be honest in certain moments that, I don't know how many people could say some of the things we've said to each other without it blowing up, and, I'm a woman, and I'm passionate and sometimes hormonal, and sometimes I can get emotional about things that don't need to be emotional. But I'm really grateful that at least my partner has always been very good at staying level-headed about things and keeping me level. Yeah, and I say it like not in a way to be like, look at us, but like, we don't fight, like, especially before our daughter was born, we had never gotten in an argument really about anything. After that, it was about who was too tired to get up in the middle of the night, or just like
reasonable. When it's 3:30 in the morning, you're allowed to be cranky.
Like, no, I'm more tired, you should get her. No, I'm more tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah,
it sounds like an amazing ability to just not take things personally. And I know from my own personal work, and I'm sure from yours, it's like managing our inner wounded child, our ego, the ways that we take things personally or get upset, where actually that hasn't, it's us interpreting something, not necessarily incorrectly, it's how we're interpreting it, but we're taking something from a past wounded state, and we're bringing it into the present moment where it really kind of doesn't belong. So it's like impeccable relationship etiquette to be able to kind of very clearly and directly state something, but then also, manage those emotional responses that might come from it.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm no master at it. I definitely get emotional sometimes, but I think that I think I might be better at it than a typical person, perhaps. But you're right. It does, because when I do get emotional, right, it comes from like this like wounded inner child, or like abandonment issues, or yeah, feeling inadequate or feeling like I'm going to have the rug ripped up from under me. These are all things that come from like the past. Like you said, they don't belong here. Like being able to take a snapshot of my life, like none of this applies, but somehow I'm still reacting to it, you know? So that's a really good point, Julie. Yeah, because I feel like I've witnessed, you know, in my life throughout my childhood, in the media, through friendships, like so many relationships where they just, something's uncomfortable to talk about, so they just don't, you know, and they let it see how it rides out. But I just feel like it doesn't really do anyone service or anyone justice either, because it's like, um, you know, for example, just kind of like what I was just using as an example, is like, oh, I find it unattractive when you do X, Y, Z. You know, that could be a conversation that doesn't need to be said, but also like my partner like deserves to know, you know, that like I'm sure he wants me to think he wants me always to be attracted to him. And I think he also deserves to know what I feel like I deserve from a partner, you know?
That's huge. That's so huge.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're saying that too, you're not saying it with blame. You're not saying it with like hate or resentment. And I think that that's what really can start to chip away at things, is where maybe something isn't said and then it begins to fester and boil because it doesn't go away.
No, and I like witnessed that growing up. Arguments that were never resolved just piling on top of each other until like it's just, you know, people end up in marriages where they're just like so annoyed with each other and they don't know why, and it's literally probably like 20 years of unresolved little things. So Jake would probably he picks on me quite a bit about this because I am kind of an over communicator. I kind of have to like put it to bed, you know, like if there's like a little issue, I need to like analyze it, talk about it, put it away. Like I can't kind of just let it resolve itself, which perhaps is a little too much sometimes. But for me, that's what makes me feel safe in my relationship, like knowing exactly where we're both at when when a conflict or an issue does arise, you know? Yeah.
And to be able to be heard in that,
Mm-hmm.
and to be listened to, because I know, at least for myself, times where I have felt hurt or I don't like something, but I don't speak up. I usually don't speak up because I'm afraid if I do, the person will be mad at me, we'll break up, things will end. So it's like I'm sort of repressing myself in service of the relationship, but actually it's a disservice to both myself and the relationship, because
Yeah.
those things, like we mentioned, they don't go away. But to be able to articulate them, I mean, both it's an expression of that sort of emotional safety within the relationship, but it also solidifies that safety, because now you're kind of giving your partner that chance to really hear you and see you,
Mm-hmm.
and take it however they take it, but regardless, like show up for you.
Exactly. And it kind of circles back around to like, what is the point of your relationship, right? Um, and there's no judgment behind this. I think a lot of people end up in relationship because they don't want to live their life alone. And um, we could look at that and dissect and analyze that statement 1,000 different ways, but that's just the reality for a lot of people. Some people are in a relationship because they want to share their life with someone, and some people are in a relationship because they want to be and see the best in the other person forever, you know. And perhaps I don't realize how perhaps rare that is, to like be in relationship with the goal of like being our best and changing the world for the positive through that, you know. But I think oh, pardon me, I just heard my vacuum slam into something out there, so I was like but yeah, I think that it all kind of comes down to, it's like, what is the point of your relationship? So it's like, if your point of your relationship is just not to be lonely, or to it could just be like a distraction, or it could just be something that's fun. When arguments and when arguments arise, I feel like it might be a lot harder to even like want to do the work to come to a real resolution, because it's like, what's the point? What am I fighting for? What am I working for? So
That's a great point. That like really having your sense of purpose and then understanding how that aligns or doesn't is key to whether you're going to push through something, whether something's a deal breaker or not, right? Because it's like, okay, well, I could be okay with, I could see past, I could move through, we could work through so many different things. But at the end of the day, are we going the same way? Is this going to support us both?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it going to feel like I'm compromising myself too much?
Yeah. And I would love like to see like, I would love just like the future for all of us, to like everyone who chooses to be in partnership and choosing to be in union, like doing it for the betterment of all people, not just for themselves, right? And we know this as initiates in our lineage. It's like we fill our own cup to fill the cup of humanity, right? Like we're everything as within, so without, as above, so below. It's like everything that happens within ourselves, within our homes, within our families, like we see it out in the world. So, you know, I think a lot of us, if not all of us, have been exposed to marriages and long-term relationships that are kind of in like a distorted place, right? Where it's just like commitment, but no love, or commitment, but no like trust. Like there's commitment, like this is like a really old way of looking at things, staying together for the kids. Like we've made this life together, we're married, we committed, but
it's like a burden, an obligation.
And I feel like it kind of taints like even the sanctity of marriage. Like I know so many people my age that are like, what's the point of getting married? It's just a piece of paper. It's just legal. And I remember even Jake for the longest time, he's like, you're already my wife. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to get married. But it's because like the way we look at marriage, like perhaps our parents or movies and TVs, like our idea of marriage has kind of been super distorted, because it's not just about commitment, like commitment to the wrong thing is foolishness, right? So I think I would just love to see like everyone around me truly being in a being in partnership and being in a relationship, if it's what they choose and what they want, that makes them just like a better person. And I was told from one of our teachers that, you know, true independence is to have true independence, to be able to like live life on our own terms, by ourselves, and not by ourselves, because true independence isn't doing everything alone. It's just being able to see things through by any means necessary, right? Whether that means with a ton of help, by yourself. That's the goal, right? Having a life, being emotionally independent, and then just adding someone into your life that brings joy. And for me also, it feels like adding someone into your life that just enhances you and enhances your life. I think sometimes where we get a little bit confused is sometimes enhancing your life doesn't always look pretty or comfortable. Sometimes enhancing your life is pushing you into something that doesn't look so pretty or comfortable. But I think it's just having the discernment to see what's what. And this all kind of circles back around to like, who am I?
Those foundational things. Know yourself, which is the prescriptive above all any mystery school, the ancient mystery schools of old. Know thyself.
Yeah, and we can't get away from this. I feel like I can't have a conversation that about changing anything for the better in the world that doesn't come back down around to like, I have to know who I am, and I have to love who I am, and I have to understand myself before I can even attempt to go out into the world and make any kind of positive impact.
Absolutely. But also, don't worry, listeners. It's an evolution.
Yes.
You start where you start, you know, and you go from there. You're a work in progress. But but absolutely, like, so not to hold you back from trying, because like we talked about, that naive or innocent state, there's a lot of magic there.
So much.
But in the refinement process,
yeah,
you get the opportunity to look a little bit deeper and see some things that might be standing in the way from true service, or like we were talking about, true intimacy and really passionate love, both for yourself but then for others.
Yeah. And I guess that's really one of the first things we talked about is, you know, I think when it comes to the success of a long-term relationship, where it relates to what we were just saying in not a super intimidating way, is that you really do just need to cater to your own heart first and cater to yourself first. And, you know, I find as a mother and as a wife and as someone who has my own dreams and aspirations of things I want to create in the world, I can't do that unless I'm full, you know, whether it be from like, full from something that brought me a ton of joy, or full from a beautiful day connecting with God or connecting with my family, or being taking care of my body, it's like, I just don't, everything kind of trickles from me and my family, I'm the matriarch of my family. And so I think that just pouring love into yourself, and sometimes that can look like taking the class you want to take, or going into that business that feels risky that you really want to do, and just, or, taking a bath when you feel like you should be doing 10,000 other things. Sometimes it's just the most important thing for you to be able to show up in your relationship fully, is to like show up fully,
One thing you were talking about too, or sorry, one thing that came up when you were talking, that arose in my mind is, a lot of people struggle, like maybe they're focused on what they want to get out of a relationship. And when you were saying that, it was like, feeding yourself with that energy so that you can sort of like nourish the people around you. And I know for me, it's like trusting the reciprocation, like trusting that what you put out, you will get, trusting that feedback loop that's like a basic fundamental energetic law of reality. But sometimes we don't. And it's like when we don't trust that, we're seeking to get. And that creates this feedback loop where it's like we don't actually receive anything, because at that core, we're responsible for giving first to ourselves and then flowing that out around us.
Yeah, it's a great point. Good job, Julie.
You inspired by your wise words.
But it's very true. And that's something that's been coming up in my life recently, that I realized that I'm in a relationship where I feel like I don't desire, I don't feel like I'm lacking anything, right? Like, I don't feel like I'm not getting anything that I desire, but it does make me have to look at like, well, what am I giving? Because sometimes it can be really easy to like fall into, I had a yoga teacher that used this quote once that I really appreciated. She's like, relationships aren't 50-50, they're 90-10, but make sure sometimes you're 90 and sometimes you're 10, And so along with that, like sometimes I feel like I'm receiving so much, and it is really important, like you said, to also, make sure you're showing up for your partner the way that like you want to receive love. And I appreciate you saying this because, with like almost 12 years of being in a relationship, there is like so many different ebbs and flows of phases that we go through. And along with everything I'm saying, like feeding yourself, like showing up fully in relationship, there is like this other side of that spectrum too. Also make sure that you're loving the person in the way you feel like you deserve love, right? And being tender in the way that you feel like you deserve to be tender with. And especially for women with men, I think sometimes we forget, because whatever our perception is of what a man is and what a man needs, like sometimes we forget to be really soft and loving and affectionate with them in the way that they deserve to. And it is actually really helpful to look at like, well, what would I like in this moment? Whether it comes to like physical touch, or how do I want to be spoken to, like gifts or acts of service, whatever your love language is, like how would I want to receive? And this is like an area where I could be a better lover, and I'm learning too that I could, because I don't know from how familiar you are with like the 5 love languages, but like I receive love through acts of service, but so I naturally give acts of service, but that's not how my husband naturally receives love. So it's like sometimes I have to like learn to like tweak what's natural to me to make sure he's receiving what he needs.
That's huge. That's beautiful. When you were talking too about love, it was just making me think, about this, our energies, and how our energies are always flowing back and forth with one another in this natural exchange of life. And on some level, like when we're in flow with ourselves and we're in flow with our partner, it can be a little bit, it's not like automatic, but it sort of just happens naturally. But yeah, there might be areas where we need to correct maybe some pattern or habit that's come in, so that we can open to that flow and just allow it to continue and perpetuate. And like something that comes to mind when I think about that too is creation and amplification. I mean, you have a baby girl, so clearly you're amplifying that love because you're, amplifying and expanding your family. But that's also the power of those long-term committed partnerships where we can really just amplify those energies, whether it's love or abundance, creativity, actual businesses or children.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a result, or at its height, that is a result of those flows, which may or may not be the present reality, but
Mm-hmm.
might be something to like strive for in a relationship.
Yeah. I love that. Yes.
My diatribes, I'm sorry. I think that they're questions. They're not questions. I'm like, this is what I'm thinking.
No, it's so
But
valuable though, because yeah, having a child is also just like a totally like other subject when it comes to long-term commitment relationships. Like you said, to literally, and like you said, at its height, ideally, like all children are created through love, and um, uh, our daughter was very, very much intentionally created and always through love and pleasure and desire for her to come. And so it's so crazy to have her here and have her be like this physical, I can look at my life, I can look at my home and like the life that we've created. And these are physical expressions of what we've created together, right? But you have to see like a person and like a soul that has like come through, that is like a direct and total result of our love is, it's crazy.
it's so magical when you think
Yeah.
about it that way. I mean, and she's autonomous, like she's not yet totally autonomous, right? Because she's still very much reliant on you and Jake, but she's her own person.
Very much so, yeah. And she's expressing her individuality and who she is as a person, which is a growing experience, like a learning experience in itself for me on so many levels. I know we've talked about this, and it's totally like taken our relationship and like has evolved it. So it's made things like really uncomfortable in some ways, because that's something I think that no one really prepares you for is I remember reading in one of my pregnancy books this tiny little chapter called Baby Proofing Your Marriage, and it was like some cute little exercises, but we don't really get a lot of like guidance around the shift of this love, like going completely to two people to all of a sudden there's this other person. Like imagine just inviting another person into your relationship and loving them just as much, if not more. It's kind of a trip. So for us at least, I feel like there was a wild integration moment of like um, trying to like back align with ourselves, back with our marriage, and all of a sudden this other person we're trying to create an individual relationship with. Family is a whole nother conversation when it comes to long-term commitment and love and marriage. And I'm so new in that experience, but I'm trying to approach it with as much awareness and intention as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like you're doing it. It sounds like you're doing it. We talk about initiations. I mean, one of the first classes that you would take at the mystery school is the Empower Thyself initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that initiation is into yourself, a deeper understanding of yourself, but also into the mysteries of life, and a way for your soul now to basically access those coded energies of reality, which are always there, but kind of veiled. But I guess marriage is actually probably an initiation, and having a child, motherhood, fatherhood, a huge initiation
Mm-hmm.
into another reality.
Yeah, because like we talk a lot, like you're talking in these videos, like about relationship and romantic love, but then there's like this whole other love that exists like inside of us that we like literally cannot I shouldn't say cannot, but it's probably very difficult to untap or uncover until you become a parent. Um, and yeah, it's just another like stretching experience. It's kind of it's beautiful because like I feel like with at least the birth of my daughter, I've learned to love all children so much more deeply and love like all people so much, like we're all babies at some point. And that it's really helpful to kind of like look at other parents and other mothers and other children in like this completely different light. And even like look at my husband, like circling back around in a different light of just like you were a child and someone like a mother loved you as much as I love audio. That's insane.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And also in his fatherhood, you know, to see this other side of him expressed.
Yes. Yeah. It's I mean, I've always looked at my husband as a man, but then like, yeah, his initiation into fatherhood and the way he holds our family in this different way is yeah, it's super sexy. Yeah.
I
But
love that.
yeah. So yeah, sorry to go off on a bit into the motherhood conversation, but it does also just like tie into what I kind of keep coming back to with commitment and why we've committed to each other, you know, like what we want to create in the world and what we want to do in the world. And I think back to like when I was younger and I grew up in like a really Catholic Italian family where, you know, going to these like weddings, it was always like in a church and it was always around that they're I remember I used to get triggered behind about like what the priest would say at church around like me, like God be at the foundation of your marriage. And like just because I didn't understand, I didn't have a personal relationship with God in the way that I do now, or how I perceive God. But then it used to be really triggering. It was like, oh my God, why does their marriage have to be about the church? But I really appreciate that now in hindsight, because it's kind of what I'm saying. Like my relationship may always be in service to the light, you know, may always be in service to the goodness, preserving the goodness and the beauty and the love of life and of people. And yeah, I think that you know, I don't think we get into like relationships with boyfriends and girlfriends and being like, so why are we together? Like, what is the core foundation of our relationship? That's something that evolves as we get to know each other. But I think it might be like a really, I challenge people to try and find a creative way of like bringing that conversation up like sooner rather than later. And I know like it can just be really intense. Like, so why do you think you're here? What's the purpose of your life right off the get-go? Maybe not. Maybe you're that kind of person that goes right in, but um, I think it's important that we know that the person that we're committing any amount of time to and any amount of our heart to at least wants the same things out of life that we do. Because we can love
Absolutely.
anyone. Ideally, we can love anyone, right? Um, it's not that hard to fall in love with another person, especially their potential, because we all have such beautiful potential. But I also see that being a trap for a lot of my really wonderful, beautiful, dear friends is that they end up really committed to someone's potential and not like what they're actually doing for themselves or doing in the world or doing for their relationship, you know?
It's so important. And that's actually one of the reasons why the title of this video series is For Spiritual Women.
Mm,
Because I know for me in my dating life, I didn't used to necessarily consider myself that spiritual. I didn't always believe in God. I went through a very long period of time where I was kind of agnostic. I just wasn't really sure. It wasn't very central to my life. But now, as it's become more and more central, and even to the extent that it's like, this is what I do,
mhm.
it's I say that exactly what you said. I can love so many people. I can love so many people. But as somebody who feels like I have this purpose and who has God at the center of my life in the way that I understand that, not necessarily like Catholic God of old,
Mhm.
but even like myself as a divine being at the center of my existence, I want to be with somebody who can, if not exactly understand that, can be on that wavelength and that same understanding. Because for me, at least, to not have that core piece, I don't know how we would build a life together or go somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think to that point about, you know, everybody's different in what they're looking for, but if somebody is a spiritual woman and they see that about themselves, if that's how they assign their own self understanding, it's like, you know, understanding that you desire to be met there at
Yeah.
some level.
Yeah, I don't know how many of your viewers might relate with this, but I think about even when I was younger, before being with Jake, which was much younger, like late teens, you know, I remember I was always into spirituality in one form or another. It was like Zen Buddhism or like my experiences with psychedelics and how that was a spiritual outlet for me for a little bit. I knew that I was always that was a very like alluring and attractive thing, an exciting thing for people, you know? So I think and I see this with a lot of my really badass spiritual women friends, is they're a catch, you know, they're a gem and they're attractive, and like they're exposing perhaps men or women to something that they that's really attractive to them, you know. But I think that like that can be like a really big trap too sometimes, of like all of a sudden you're being so like admired and adored and just like loved on, but it's not being met, like you said, where it's like it's okay to be like this spiritual woman, but don't just be something that's like really kind of fun for someone. Like you want to be met. And I know that that was a past.
Don't be a shiny object.
Yeah, and that was like a past pattern for me when I was young. Is like I was like this cool woo woo like hippie girl, and like I was very a lot of that was very attractive to people, but it was also very attractive to people who couldn't meet me and really kind of just took from me, you know. So again, like I think like trying to find some way, shape, or form of having that conversation really early on. And it's something that's really confusing to me, like in like the online dating world, from what I hear, and like dating in 2021. So I hear is like there's this hesitancy to like go really hard, really quick, or like scare someone off. But it's like for me, it just seems like this like fear of, it's like shame and like this fear of intimacy, where it's like you don't want to come off a certain way. But it's like, what is the harm of like just going in and being like, oh, so what are your beliefs around this? Or like one of my
We're
favorite
cut from the same cloth, Danielle. I'm not going to
yeah.
argue with you there.
Yeah. And like, I mean, that's one of my favorite questions just to ask people in general. Is like, if money wasn't an issue and you were taken care of forever, like, what would you do with your time? You know, there's always like creative ways to like ask people what they're about and what they want. 'Cause sometimes people don't know what they want and things need to develop and we grow with each other. But at the core, like, what do you want?
And you at least want that other person, I mean, as per everything you've been saying, to know at least as much as you know for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Or to have that desire to go further.
I think that's key, is the desire, because something that I'm learning a bit recently is like our role as at least like women who very much identify with being very feminine, or the feminine
Like
aspect.
female light workers.
Yeah, it's like, you know, we there's like this really delicate line, right? We're kind of like I was just saying, you don't want to just be the shiny object of, ooh, look at this cool girl with crystals that likes cool things. She can teach me a lot. But also, if the desire is there from a man or a woman, a partner, to want to go there with you, like there is something to be said for holding the potential and holding the container for them to like come in and meet you. Because there's been like plenty of time that, you know, like I've gone to a certain point and Jake had to meet me, and Jake went to a certain point and hates me. We've never just like moved on our personal progression together gracefully. Like it's always kind of been like a teetering thing. So yeah, like don't compromise yourself or hold yourself back. But if like you end up in a situation where you find someone you're deeply in love with and you see that there's at least the real desire and they show the actual like action and will to like want to do more for themselves and be better, like there also is a space for patience. But that's a really delicate place. Delicate line, I should say.
Yeah, sage advice, and certainly delicate, and just requires like a case by case discernment. Because I know for myself, I mean, patience is something I'm working heavily on, so I can't always speak to being the most patient, but definitely sometimes we compromise. And what it's come down to, for me at least, is exactly what you said about action.
Yeah.
Has there been any I don't care how small.
Yeah, right.
Is there an action? Because people can say a lot of things, and I don't even know that they're being intentionally, it's not like they're trying to manipulate you per se. They just, people get excited and they say things and they don't do it. And that's just kind of how humans work, right? Like,
yeah,
I've done that a million times, but around something that's so important, we want to see some level of action.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I just had a dear friend recently that was kind of going through this delicate space of like, oh, giving him space to like really show up, but then also like holding a strong boundary of like, prove yourself, right? And I think that's really, you said it, the key point is just like, you really like, intentions don't mean much when there's no action. You know, they don't mean much, period. It's what you do, right? And so I think that like if you have a partner that's willing to like do the work to try and like show up for you, because I'm speaking from personal experience, like there have been times like we have like very much demanded from each other that we step up in one way or another. And they're just like has to just be like you have to see the work, you know, and you have to have a little patience.
Patience. So I've been told. I'm
But this
learning
also
about it.
isn't like something I would say to someone who is like in like a 2-month relationship. You know what I mean? Like if you're like six, for me, you know, like if I'm like 6, 7, 8, 10 years into something and I'm deeply committed on a spiritual and physical plane, it's like sometimes there just has to be some space for patience. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because these changes are like the foundational work is there. Like I know who you are, I see who you are, I trust you, I love you, and I'm committed to you. Which means like I'm committed to like see you through some like really gross, uncomfortable things and vice versa, you know? And I think that is like the scary thing about commitment is knowing that like at least for the rest of your life, like envision some of the most uncomfortable things you've gone through as an individual and having someone see you through it all. Yeah, it's weird.
It's like on the one hand you're supported, which is amazing, but on the other hand you're like, please don't look.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like yeah, the level of which like we can project the things that we're going through and don't want to look at on someone else is so real, you know? So I have a friend of mine who we joke about this where it's like it just seems like you're working all the time when you're on like a path of self-mastery and self-development, and then also in a relationship with someone doing the same thing. It's like you always like are triggered in some way, your negative ego comes up in some way. I mean, but it's also like really fun to like literally always have like these things that you can be working on. And maybe like maybe most people aren't like this where they always want to be tested to be better. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but um I think for the spiritually minded woman looking for relationships, like that's what they're looking for is like a
I
man
think that's
to
what
like,
they're looking for. Yeah.
yeah,
I
king.
think that's what we're moving towards as well, more and more societally, like as our understanding of ourselves evolves, as our understanding of love and relationships evolves. I mean, we're moving into a time of divine union.
Yeah,
And that's what divine union necessitates.
yeah. Unconditional love and acceptance and yeah, those have been some of the biggest lessons for me, even this far into it. It's just been like, what is unconditional love and how deeply do I accept you and where do I let go of my expectations? And like, I think it's really easy when you are married to someone, live with someone, been with someone for a long time, have a child with someone to get really um, unconsciously into like that pattern of just like working side by side to like maintain a home or maintain a family, maintain a business. And I know personally like that sometimes creates all these expectations like, oh, well, you didn't do this, or you didn't do this, you didn't do this. And it's like, what would it look like if for a day I just decided to like have no expectations, live my life, take care of what I need to take care of, and then just like not expect anything from you, just see you and love you. And what would that look like? You know, I've been trying to practice that a lot more because I think I can get really um, absorbed in like this idea of like who we are right now and what we've always done, but it's like what does it look like moving forward? And yeah, it's been like really fun like having conversations sometimes. I'm like, oh, well, I was gonna say this, but I knew you'd say this. I'm like, well, ask me again, you don't know I'd say that. Like, or when we moved here to Orlando, I remember Jake, his boss, because long story short, we were supposed to move somewhere else, we were like in a temporary place, and his boss was like, hey, so I think that we'd like you to go to Orlando. And Jake came home and he's like, I told him that like you weren't going to be into it and it'd just be too much. And I'm like, well, no, let's talk about it. Cause it's like, we're changing so much. It's like, don't expect how someone feels about something, or don't expect to know like what someone thinks, or don't expect to assume what someone's doing with their day or how they're feeling about something. It always changes. And I'm here
That goes to your there is no over communication policy, I guess.
yeah, ask me again.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we're actually at time, but it has been so illuminating having you on. I know that our listeners will agree as well, and hopefully have you back on to illuminate some other areas that we just touched on, because I think that there's more there.
That's great. Thanks.
So thanks, Danielle. And for anybody who wants to contact Danielle, all of her information is below the video. So we'll put those links there and make sure that you have ways to find out more about Fiat Lux, especially if you are in that area of Central Florida. So
yeah, thanks, Julie. I love you.
Love you too. You're the best. Oh, that just
I
lit my
love
heart
you.
up.
Yeah.
All right. And we love you too, listeners. All right. Thank you.
Bye.